Many people say that music is a universal language. If that's the case, I would like to use music as a platform to talk about health. My name is Dr. Moshe Lewis, and I'm a full-time practicing physician who loves music and the way it affects our brains, our bodies, and our well-being. I would like to invite you to tune in where we interview musical artists about health matters that are important to them. But the truth is, we'll be discussing topics that affect all of us. From mental health to body image, cancer screening to stroke, our health is truly our greatest asset. So the goal is to open the dialogue on health to embrace topics that we don't always like to talk about in a way that's raw, candid, and lit. Hopefully, these discussions will improve the health of our community. After all, your health matters to me, and if I can make it sound more beautiful, then that's something we should all listen to.
Music and medicine, when you hear those words, how do they speak to your heart?
Music and medicine. Music is medicine. You feel me?
Welcome to Music and Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Moshe Lewis. Really excited and delighted to be joined by young talent here, musician, author, jazz, saxophonist. But the most important one that touches my heart, honestly, and we didn't talk about it yet, is being a father.
Yeah.
I know you really literally went out of your way today, brought your daughter.
Yeah.
I sometimes travel with the kids too. That's
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
Just let's start there. Talk to us about that importance and that bond.
You know, I feel like, I have to be the first example for my daughter. And I want her to see what it's like when I'm on the road, when I'm touring. I want her to understand my job. I want her to see what it takes. I want her to understand the hard work that it takes. And I just love bonding with her too. She gets to listen to my music more than she wants in the car. I say, well, I got to listen to it again because I'm mixing. And she may say, well, can we listen to something else? So it's a lot of fun. And she gets to see me on stage and perform and just kind of, really decide if she wants to embrace that kind of life, and follow in my footsteps. I don't want to push her in any kind of like direction so much. I'm nudging her to the saxophone as best as possible. But, I feel it's important. But for me, it's just something that it's natural for me. I love doing it. And I just love being, out there for her. And I tell her, when she's way old, I'm still going to be her dad. You still gonna be my boo. So
Sure. I love it. I love it. We don't see enough of those images, I feel, and it's so important. And that's why from the moment that they told me that she was coming, I thought that is really touching that you drive, essentially 2 hours with her, and spend some time with us in the middle of a weekend. So it touches our heart. Another unique aspect about you is that you hail from Virginia. We've got a lot of people on this show. We don't have too many who've made that journey. So talk to us about growing up there and sort of getting into music as a child.
Wow, it's crazy because music started for me, I would say probably around 11.
Right.
And I remember my mom taking us to church. There was I'm from Norfolk, Virginia. That's where I was born, Norfolk, Virginia. And the pastor, bishop at the time, Bishop Patterson, would have these events called Soul Explosions, and they would feed people we were in the project, so they would bring food and music, and I was just so excited.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't like to go to church, but I said, Mom, we can go to that church. She took us every Sunday, by the way. But I was so fascinated by the musicians, honestly, just, seeing the piano play and piano player play, and then the drums playing and guitar and then the choir. And I was just 11 years old, just blown away. So I would, after service, I would just like go over to the musicians and talk to them and say, can I sit on the drums?
Right.
And, I would play the drums as much as I could. And I was too young to join the youth choir, but they let me join the youth choir. I was like one of the youngest in the youth choir singing. So this is way before I started playing the saxophone. That's a later story.
Sure.
But I think that's what really sparked music for me was those moments and those experiences in a church before I started playing the saxophone.
Sure. A lot of people tell us that they didn't have the exposure in school, and even just being able to get an instrument. I mean, these things are not, all that cheap. What was your experience in Norfolk?
Well, my mother later moved to Syracuse, New York.
Okay.
It's cold up there.
Sure,
but...
yeah. So I know it well.
Yeah. So, and that's where I started playing saxophone.
Sure.
When I was going into high school, I told my mother, I want to be in a band because, I've been playing the drums at church and I would love to be in a high school band. Yeah. So, she took me, introduced me to the music teacher, and the music teacher, Lou Adams at the time, said, well, we need, we don't need any drummers. Everybody wants to play the drums.
Exactly right.
So, if you want to be in the band, you're going to have to either play a woodwind or a brass instrument.
Right.
And I said, what's a woodwind?
Exactly right. Is that like Steve or something?
So he said, well, I can take you over here and show you.
Right.
The first thing I saw was, he took me to the big band closet. The big messy band closet with all the instruments in there.
Right.
The kids refused to take them home. I don't know why, but
Not sure.
the first thing I saw was a tuba.
Okay.
And I said, well, there's no way I'm carrying that home. And then I saw a trumpet, and I said, gosh, it's only got 3 notes on it. That seems really limited. He said, well, it plays all the notes. But anyways, then he showed me the flute.
Right.
And then I said, okay, well, I thought the flute was for girls.
And people used to think I was a girl when
Yeah,
I was
like,
younger,
okay, I didn't see
played
any
the flute
guys
stuff.
playing flute.
Yes.
So then I saw this instrument. It had to have, maybe 1,000 buttons on it.
Right.
It was, from my perspective, it was floating on a cloud.
Right.
There was a rainbow over it, sparkles everywhere, choir singing from the heavens. And I said, what is that? He said, well, that, young sir, is called a saxophone.
Right.
And I said, teach me how to play that. He said, well, let's start. He gave me a tape first, cassette tape. And on the tape was Grover Washington Jr., Charlie Parker, Cannonball, John Coltrane, Grover Washington Jr. It was, and I took the tape home and I just was playing it, and it was just something that was resonating with me. I didn't know who they were. You know, many years later, I realized that they were the people.
Right.
You know,
Lived.
but I was just trying to mimic them. I mean, he gave me a couple of notes, but I took the saxophone home and I was just trying to figure this thing out, every single day. And about 3 weeks later, he had thought that I was, really improving better than any student that he had, to the point to where he decided to have the principal come down to see me play. And he said, "You got to hear this kid. He's only been playing for 3 weeks.
Right.
It's unbelievable what he could do." I was a nervous wreck.
Of course.
And I didn't like the attention. And I think it was something that the science teacher said. She said, "We could hear you playing," because I was playing really loud.
Right, which is important.
Me and another trumpet player, we both started at the same time, and we were just really loud. But, honestly, that's my saxophone story.
Yeah.
How I got started. And then I started to really just look up who some of these people were, who Charlie Parker was, who John Coltrane was. And then I started, because I was playing a sound that was more of like a straight ahead jazz, like a bebop and stuff like that. But then I heard on the radio a guy named Gerald Albright play a song called My,
yes,
by Johnny Gill.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I didn't know you could do that on the saxophone.
Right.
So I started to dabble into that world of contemporary jazz and started to look up artists like George Duke and then Kirk Whalum and just a host of artists. It took me to a whole new world. And I think, I had said to myself that this is what I want to do. This is who I want to be.
Right.
And, really the rest is history. I just kept up with it and kept practicing it and kept playing. And honestly, I was in competitions. I was in an NAACP competition and I won that. And then I started going to music composition. It's a full story. Sure. I don't know how much time you got.
That's right. It's like my whole life. But on that note, I mean, some of those highlights are debut album of Baby Soul back in 2007. It's 20 years now in the business. And many of those names that you're mentioning, the younger people, you've had the pleasure of working with, including George Duke.
Yes. And it was crazy because you're right. My first CD, Baby Soul, came out in 2007. And it's just, after high school, I went and toured with some artists, Gene Carn, Ronnie Laws, Angela Bofill. I was 21.
Right. Ronnie Laws.
And I did a 30-city tour at 21.
Right.
So that was like something, and then, opening the show for Ronnie Laws, and, he really loved how I played. So he would have me come up and play like, Friends and Strangers.
Sure. Wow.
And, and then Angela Bofill would have me play the saxophone part to like some big song that everyone knew. Right. And it was important for me to play it exactly like that. Sure. So that was a whole experience for me. And I really felt that that's where I needed to go, so I moved here to California.
Right. Logically.
So, and I said, I really want to do this. And I figured that this, Los Angeles, Hollywood is where it's all at, so, I did I cut my teeth sending demos out, making phone calls, getting hung up on, calling them back again, sending the same CD back again, sending the tape again. And it was just, it was honestly years of that, quite frankly. But I got a chance to meet a lot of great musicians. And I remember this was my very last job. I remember I was 26 years old, 2006, and I was working at Target Warehouse. And they fired me. I don't know why they would do that. But anyway.
It maybe was a blessing.
But the very next day, I was offered a recording contract by the label that was headed by Rick Braun, Richard Elliott. They had my demo that I sent a year ago. Right. And so they contacted me a year later. And said they sent it over to a bunch of people from the radio stations and different things like that. And everyone liked it, because I was writing my own music. And they said, what kind of deal are you looking at? We would like to go ahead and sign you and put you on the radio. And that was that was my entry into a whole new world of music and performance. I remember my first song I heard on radio, 94.7 The Wave.
Yeah.
It was my song called Stay With Me Tonight, featuring Peter White. I was just about to get out of my car and it came on and I couldn't believe it.
Sure.
And that's like, is everyone hearing this?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
You know, so.
And you mentioned that name quickly, but Peter is a legend as
Yes, yes, he is a legend. I didn't know who he was. I know
Sure.
Rick Braun said, well, we got this guy that's going to come over and play your song.
So
His
the
name is
guy-
Peter White or whatever, British accent.
Right, white hair. No big deal.
And I, years later, I found out he was
Right.
kind
Right,
of the thing.
exactly.
And he was on that song and I couldn't believe it. So I was on the radio. I'm calling my mom. I'm calling my grandma. I'm like, wow, I'm on the radio. And, in Los Angeles, imagine that, right? I put my next album out, Little Man Soul, which followed Baby Soul, came out in 2009. The single, I'm Waiting for You, went to radio. And I remember I was doing a show in Denver and my manager called me. He said, Mr. Joyner, you're number one.
Right.
I said, what's number one? He said, well, you're number one on the Billboard.
Yeah.
I said, what's the Billboard?
Right. What is that?
He said, well, you'll figure. When I
It's a
got
good
the
thing.
when I got the check,
So then you realize
I
how
understood
important that was.
very much for
Right.
BMI.
Right.
So that was like all of a sudden I was this guy, that wrote these songs that I guess people loved, and I didn't, I'm 20 something years old, so everyone's treating me like, the new young guy. Who is this kid?
Right.
I followed it up with another single called Take Me There that went straight to number one and spent 6 weeks at number one. So they was like, you know what? I think we should probably take Jackiem seriously. And
Right.
he's
not
a
just
player,
Right.
So I wasn't like kind of a cocky dude or nothing like that. It's just
That
I
still
write
comes across.
songs, So the crazy thing is that being a saxophone player and a performer is really different than being a producer and writing songs, which is really a whole nother hat. My experience of writing songs was in a store called Radio Shack.
I remember
Believe
that.
it or not.
I remember
So
that.
Radio Shack had a Casio keyboard in there, and on this keyboard you could play something, it would play it back, and then you could record another track, and it would play that back, and then you could record. I was blown away.
Exactly.
I couldn't believe it.
Right.
I couldn't
Sped up the
believe
process.
it. And I said, okay, I'm going to keep doing this. I was in that Radio Shack for some hours until the manager said, look, sir, you got to leave.
Exactly. And you're not buying anything. You definitely.
Yeah, but that was my first song. She powered off the button,
Sure.
lost that song.
Oh, no.
That could have been a hit.
Exactly.
Who knows?
Free studio time.
Exactly. But, I just took that with me and I was like, okay, I need to figure out how I can do this because I'm addicted to this whole idea of producing.
Yeah.
And so I figured it out. And the first album, Baby Soul, was actually, a lot of people don't know this, it was produced in Virginia before I came to California. It was kind of the demo that was sent to all of the labels and stuff like that. So Rick Braun, after they signed me to the label, we fixed it up and different things like that and created the album. But it really came from that production and stuff like that. So, so now I consider myself as a writer, producer, songwriter, and performer, saxophone player.
Absolutely. All thanks to Radio Shack.
Yeah, thanks to Radio Shack. I wish you guys didn't go under, but, Amazon is a little bit easier.
Right. Just can't get free studio time, but we're working on that. They got some studios here.
Yes.
We would be remiss if we didn't talk about your authorship because it makes you a Renaissance man. How did you get into writing?
Wow. So I didn't ever think I would get into writing stories. As I started performing and touring around the world, I started to go to some really strange places. Russia, Ukraine, Azerbaijan, toured all of Japan, South Africa, Germany, just a host of countries. And we would be, backstage a lot of times and just waiting for them to set up. And I remember just starting on this story and I just started writing a story. The crazy thing is people ask me, why did I get into writing? It's because I'm a critic of movies, and I guess it's like, I'm like, why didn't they do this? They should have done this. The actor wasn't this, and I said to myself, well, why don't you write your own story?
It's like, right.
And I'm like, me writing a story.
Right.
Come on. But I started, just
Okay.
using this little thing, this little tool called Evernote.
Right. Yeah.
I started writing this book here,
Sure. So what's the cover?
Zaria. This is my first book,
Yeah.
Zaria. I started this back in 2012 as an idea.
Right.
As a concept, because I didn't think that I was going to really write a book,
Right.
So
Thoughts.
just, but I just kept going back at it and rewriting and, and just like, wow, this is interesting. I can put whatever I want in this book. Yeah, you can put whatever you want. It's like, it's your God in the book, so I just kept writing. And a year later, I'm like, okay, I'm trying to put it together. And then I'm starting to think, this kind of feels like putting an album together, because it's like a chapter is a
Right.
song, right?
Exactly.
So it's like I'm using the same kind of like mindset here, and I want to make everything make sense. And now I got to put the plots together. And, I didn't go to school for this kind of a thing, but just kept rewriting it and going back at it. I set a rule for myself. I said, no matter what, 5 minutes a day,
Always right.
I'm going to write
Yeah.
regardless.
Yeah. That's it for every writer. Don't
Yes,
stop.
exactly. And about 4 years
Sure.
to
Right.
get this one
Literally,
done.
but that's quality.
And about 7 months of editing with the editor. My first book, Zaria, comes out, which is a teenage a hero on another planet in the future, 1,000 years in the future, on a desert planet. Think Divergent series meets Avatar, meets The Fifth Element. Flying vehicles, crazy creatures like from Star Wars and different things like that. But a young teenager is going against the military government, who is doing bad things.
Right.
So, and then she's got a team of high school friends, and they're flying on these, hoverboards and stuff like that. I mean, whatever, the stuff that's in my head.
Sure, exactly. And the things your daughter may be doing.
Exactly. So that started me off, really. And then I started on another book called Minor Assassin. I guess I was addicted to writing at this point.
Right. Now it's in the book.
And, I love movies like from Jet Li, Jackie Chan.
Yeah.
I liked the Karate Kid movie that Will Smith did.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, how can I add a real world kind of a situation, whereas this is more fantasy,
Right.
fiction. Minor Assassin is more it's more of the real thing. It's real fighting, it's real weapons, it's except for, again, it's a teenager.
Sure.
And someone did ask me, about that. I was on the Stephen King podcast for Minor Assassin, because a teenager wants to take the law into his own hand to rescue his sister from human traffickers. So it's kind of serious, It starts off in tragedy with his parents, and then whoever they were working with whips him off to Japan at 8 years old. He goes there, learns how to use all these weapons, all this discipline and all of these things, comes back to Las Vegas, and he's basically hell-bent on revenge and rescuing his sister, but he's got the tools and stuff. So, and it's, detectives and all of that stuff, which is really kind of different than Zaria. So, clearly I love writing.
Sure. And your passion comes across. I love it.
Yes.
Set us up for the song we're going to hear.
So we mentioned Peter White,
Yeah.
who's actually on the song,
Right.
Last Dance, and Last Dance is on my most recent album, Touch.
Yeah.
And, I like to say the Touch album is really all about the grown and sexy, kind of one of those nighttime albums or daytime, whatever. It's like someone's close to you album. So Peter White's on that. Also Najee is on it. So this track is a song that I wrote and produced called Last Dance.
A pleasure. The next sound we'll hear will be that of Jackiem Joyner, but listening to your story and hearing the infectious positivity that you radiate, it's no wonder that everybody appreciates and not only can feel, the music through that soul that you're giving us. I love it. Your heart comes across.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.